Have you ever sat beside the woman who's been with you for decades and suddenly realized you're physically close, but your hearts feel a lifetime apart? She still cooks for you every day. You still take her to regular checkups. You still talk about the kids, the bills, who forgot to turn off the stove. But how long has it been since you last heard her laugh the way she used to? How long has it been since you dared to gently touch her back when walking past? Not because you were angry, but because it felt awkward. And have you ever quietly wondered in your heart, I still love her? So why does it feel like the love has faded this much? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. If you believe that love after 50 is not only possible, it's powerful. We share real stories, honest advice, and daily inspiration for couples who want to reconnect in ways that matter. I've seen 80-year-old men making tea for their wives every morning, not out of romance, but because she has a headache today, ginger tea will help. I've heard elderly women say, I can't remember the last time we held hands, but I still feel warm every time he fixes my sweater. And I've come to understand, true love doesn't disappear. It just changes form, quieter, calmer, but deeper. This video isn't about reviving your sex life. It won't promise to make your wife look at you like she did when you were 30. We're simply sharing small things that can breathe life back into a tired marriage through a glance, a gesture, a whisper at the right time. Because over 50 years of living together, the happiest couples didn't keep the flame alive through passion alone. They held on through a quiet, unspoken commitment. I still choose you every day. And if you're wondering where to begin, try this. Tomorrow morning, slip a small note into her purse. Just 5 simple words. Thank you for still being here. You'd be amazed how one tiny gesture can warm a heart that's forgotten how to feel seen. If you've ever quietly reminisced about when you were both young, if somewhere deep inside you still feel that love hasn't disappeared, you just don't know the way back to it anymore, then this video is for you. Leave a 1 if you've ever wished to start again. Leave a 0 if you still don't quite understand what went wrong. We'll continue the story through real-life tales of people who stayed together for life. Mrs. Eleanor is now 82 years old. Small in stature, hair silver and thin as silk, but her eyes still shine. There's something in them that glows softly, like she's holding on to something precious. I met her on a chilly October afternoon at a retirement home in suburban Vermont. She doesn't live alone. She lives with Mr. George, her husband of 60 years and her one and only love. She told me they met in 1959 when she was just 16 and he had just finished his military service. The first time their eyes met was in a bakery. She was behind the counter and he walked in to buy a sweet loaf of bread. He had nothing but a faded uniform and a pair of worn-out shoes, she said with a gentle smile. He looked at me like I was the only person in the room. They fell in love, got married, and began their life with nothing but patience and a small rented home. Over 60 years together, they weathered every kind of storm. A miscarriage, bankruptcy after a failed business, and then George's diabetes that plagued him for nearly 20 years. There were times we lived on thin porridge and split a single painkiller, she said, but I never once thought about leaving, because even in the worst of times, he never let go of my hand. I asked her, what kept the two of you together all those years? She didn't answer right away. She looked out the window, where George was slowly watering the chrysanthemums in the yard. his hands trembling, but each drop landing perfectly at the roots. Then she turned back to me and said slowly, "We never went to bed angry, not out of romance, but because what if tomorrow one of us doesn't wake up?" This isn't some storybook philosophy of love. It's the truth, lived by those who've learned to love through presence, without conditions, and without knowing how many days they have left together. Every morning, Mr. George still wakes up earlier than his wife. He warms water and sets it beside the bed, then rubs oil into the soles of her feet, the part that aches every time the weather shifts.
He still calls her my girl, even though her eyes have dimmed and her back no longer stands straight. She told me every time she brushes her hair, he gently untangles the knots with his fingers instead of a comb, because his hands are softer. Hearing all that, I couldn't help but wonder, could it be that these small gestures, rubbing oil, pet names, untangling hair, are the reason two people can walk through more than half a century and still look at each other like it's day one? Mrs. Eleanor didn't use the word passion. She didn't speak of physical attraction or desire. But in the way she looked at him, this man who now moves slowly, sometimes forgetfully, I saw a love that needed no definition. A kind of love that transcended physical closeness and became a habit of the soul. This isn't a fairy tale. There are no diamond rings, no overseas vacations, no lavish anniversaries, just two people choosing to stay every day, even when tired, even when tears were shed alone, but never once thinking of giving up. Because without him, I'm not me anymore. Love, after 70, may no longer burn bright, but it simmers like a winter hearth, small, steady, and warm enough to fill an entire home. And maybe what we need isn't to rekindle love, like the books always say. Maybe it's to relearn how to love the way George and Eleanor do, quietly, but never cold. There's something most men over 50 never say, not because they don't feel it, but because they don't know how to put it into words. It's that silent ache they feel when their wife pulls away from even a simple hug. They're not angry. They don't blame her, but deep inside there's a quiet sting. She doesn't need me anymore. I'm not attractive. Maybe I no longer have a place in her life. And over time, they shrink back. They stop touching her for fear of being pushed away. They stop complimenting her, afraid to be misunderstood. They stop trying and call it acceptance. But on the other side, that woman, the one who spent her youth by your side, is retreating too. Not because she no longer loves you, but because she no longer feels safe being close. A marriage therapist once said, "Women never stop needing to be touched. They only stop responding when those touches no longer feel tender." Many men confuse sex with intimacy. They think if they're no longer having regular sex, the love is gone. But for women after 50, what they need most isn't desire. It's emotional safety. Did you know a hug that expects nothing is the most powerful form of communication between two people who've shared a life? A hand gently placed on her shoulder when she's tired carries more weight than many moments of physical intimacy. Mr. George, the silver-haired husband you heard about earlier, once said, "After 70, I can't do what I used to in bed, but every night I still rub her feet. I still kiss her forehead each morning, and I still say, 'My girl, you look beautiful today,' even though my eyesight is too blurry to really see her." And you know what? Mrs. Eleanor said those little touches made her feel loved, not needed, out of obligation. Sex is a natural part of love, but it cannot survive without tenderness. Tenderness is when you look at her with gentle eyes, even when she's forgotten something 3 times in a row. It's when you brush her hair, not because she asked, but because you don't want her arms to ache. It's when you listen to a story she's told 10 times and still nod as if it's the first. A widower once told me, What I miss most about my wife isn't the time we spent together in the bedroom. It's when I'd wash my hands and she'd quietly hand me the towel. Sex might fade with time, but tenderness, that's the lifeblood of a lasting relationship. If you're feeling distant from your wife, don't try to reignite sex. Start with the small things, the ones that ask for nothing and expect nothing. A hug from behind while she's washing dishes. A simple, "Thank you for dinner, it was delicious." A soft look when she's sitting next to you in silence. That is where love begins again.
Tenderness doesn't make you weaker. It makes you the kind of man she wants to come home to. Not out of duty, but because you bring her peace. If you want to rekindle intimacy, start by clearing a path with gentleness. Reach her soul before you reach for her body. And then you'll see, physical connection doesn't need to be requested. It returns on its own when the heart is touched first. Sex is not as important as tenderness, because tenderness can last a lifetime, even when health has faded, and it becomes the only thing that keeps two people holding hands when nothing else is left but the final years. One late afternoon, under the pale autumn sun, Mrs. Eleanor held Mr. George's hand as they sat by the window, watching the leaves fall. I asked her a simple question. Have you ever felt tired or bored of this marriage? She smiled. Not the kind of smile that dodges the question, but one that spoke the truth. Then she said, "Of course. Who hasn't thought about giving up?" But every time I felt that way, I'd ask myself, if not him, then who? That answer stayed with me. No grand declarations, no magic solutions, just a choice. A choice to stay. A choice to keep loving. A choice not to give up. People often say true love is effortless, that it should come naturally. But Mrs. Eleanor has lived a lifetime proving the opposite. Love, in the end, is a conscious act. It's not the fever of youth or the rush of a wedding night. It's the decision you make every morning when you look at the person beside you, with gray hair, with wrinkles, and still feel, I choose this one. No one teaches us that love needs to be chosen again, each day. When we're young, we love by instinct, by passion. But after 50, when the body changes, when life grows heavier, when dreams feel distant, we can no longer rely on fleeting feelings. We must love with commitment. I remember Mr. George once told me that in their 15th year of marriage, there came a time when he felt like he and Eleanor had nothing left to say. They lived together, ate at the same table, slept in the same bed, but felt like strangers in parallel worlds. He said, I started to wonder if this was the end. But one morning, I saw her quietly slip a pair of socks into my shoes before I left for work. Such a small thing, but it made me realize she was still choosing me in the quietest way. And so he chose her back. Not with speeches, but through small acts. Making coffee ahead of time. Changing a light bulb she didn't ask about. Sitting beside her during a show he didn't care for. Gradually, those gestures began to stitch the space between them. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough for love to return, like warmth under an old blanket. Many believe that after 50, there's no second chance at love. They think if the fire has gone out, it can't be relit. But they forget, love doesn't need to be fireworks. Sometimes it's just a small light at the end of the hallway, enough to keep us from stumbling in the dark. And that light is the deliberate choice to stay, to forgive, to look at each other like it's the first time, again. Lasting love isn't for those good at keeping the flame alive. It's for those willing to gather the embers, blow gently, even when their hands are tired. It doesn't require perfection, just sincerity. You don't have to understand each other completely, only be willing to relearn each other every day. And maybe that's what makes resilient marriages so special. Not because they never hurt each other, but because after each hurt, they chose to heal, not to return to the past, but to move forward together as new versions of themselves. If your marriage feels worn, numb, or like there's nothing left to say, try this. Silently choose that person again. No need to say it out loud, no need for long letters. Just one touch without a reason. One, "You look tired today," instead of silence.
One gaze held a few seconds longer, like you're looking again at the person you once loved and still do. You might be surprised how one small change can stir a heart that seemed asleep. Because love doesn't die, it just waits for someone to knock. And if today you're the one reading this first, be the one who knocks. Because when two people turn toward each other, choosing one another again, not because of youth or attraction, but because of what they've been through together, that's when love becomes eternal. Love isn't a one-time feeling. It's a choice. Steady, quiet, and full of reverence. Like the way Mr. George still buttons the back of Eleanor's dress every morning, even with trembling hands. Like the way Mrs. Eleanor still reminds him to wear his hat before gardening, even though her memory fades. They choose each other, not because they had no other options, but because among all the options, no one else made them want to stay more than the person beside them. Are you ready to choose your person again, today? Some relationships fall apart because of betrayal. Some romances end due to distance. But most of the fading marriages I've witnessed didn't break because someone did something wrong. They faded simply because both people stopped choosing each other. No more gentle check-ins at night. No more natural hand-holding on the way to the market. No more affectionate glances across the room. And just like that, love doesn't vanish. It simply gets forgotten in the chaos of the years. We think love will survive if it's deep enough, if it's lasted long enough. But the truth is, nothing survives without care. Not even love. You might be sitting next to someone who once meant the world to you, yet feel like strangers. You might be sharing meals, sharing a bed, but the connection feels faint. You're not angry, but you're also not excited. You're not upset, but you don't miss each other either. And in that in-between space, love quietly retreats. No sound, no drama, just an absence that grows. But the most beautiful thing I've learned from long-lasting marriages is this: love can always come back if you're patient enough to find your way back to it. It doesn't take grand promises. It doesn't take expensive dinners. It only takes a simple daily choice to love again. Through the smallest things: a warm word in the morning, a touch for no reason, a look filled with tenderness without expectation. Because for the woman who's walked with you through youth and beyond, what she needs most isn't perfection, it's presence. Not strength, but attention. Not passionate nights, but ordinary moments that still make her feel chosen. And if today you feel like there's been too much distance between you and the one you love, please don't despair. Maybe you don't need to start from scratch. Maybe you just need to start again, with one small step. So what could that first step be? Maybe it's a simple message. I miss the old you. Maybe it's brewing her a cup of tea like you did when you first met. Or maybe it's as simple as sharing this video with her and saying, I think we should watch this together. Or maybe you can just write her name on a sticky note, draw a little heart beside it, and place it on the bathroom mirror, not to win her back, but to remind her and yourself that you still see her. If something in this video has touched you, leave a 1 in the comments. If you're still quietly observing, not sure where to begin, leave a 0. We'll continue sharing real stories, so you'll know you're not alone in this journey. Love doesn't die. We just forget how to keep it alive. And today you can be the one to reignite what once seemed lost. Thank you for staying until the end. If you believe love can begin again after 50, subscribe to our channel and walk with us, because we'll be telling many more stories, honest, ordinary, and powerful enough to move even the hearts that once felt hardened. We believe love has no age, only people who forget how to love. And if you're still choosing to stay, then love is still waiting for you to come home.